Okay, now let's take a look at how we would multiply binomial radical expressions. So here you can see we have two radical binomial radical expressions, 4 plus 2 root 2 times 5 plus 4 root 2. So if we wanted to multiply these together, we just do it like we would multiply any two binomials together. Right? We can use that FOIL method. So let's go ahead and start doing that. We have our first two terms. So we have 4 times 5, that equals 20. Then we have the outside, that's 4 times 4 root 2. Well, that just gives us 20, or I'm sorry, not 20, 16 root 2. Now we have the two inside terms, 2 root 2 times 5, and that gives us 10 root 2. And finally, we have our last two terms. We have 2 root 2 times 4 root 2. And that's going to give us 8 times the square root of 4. But that square root of 4, that can be simplified to 2. Right? So this is actually going to be 8 times 2, and that's equal to 16. So now we have 20 plus 16 root 2 plus 10 root 2 plus 16. All right, now we take a look and we see that we have two terms that have a radical of root 2, square root of 2. So we can combine these two terms. So if we do that, we now have 20 plus 26 root 2 plus 16. And now we're not done yet because we can also combine this 20 and this 16. And that would give us 36 plus 26 root 2. And now we're all finished. Now there's nothing else we can do here. So we just multiplied these two binomial radical expressions, and we got 36 plus 26 root 2. Now let's talk about conjugates. So, like it says here, conjugates are expressions like the square root of a plus the square root of b, and the square root of a minus the square root of b. And the only difference between the two of them is the sign of the second term. See how the only difference between this right here and this right here is that plus sign and this minus sign. Square root of a, square root of a, square root of b, square root of b. Only difference is the plus sign in front of the square root of b and this minus sign in front of the square root of b. And we have a little rule here. It says when a and b are rational numbers, the product of two radical conjugates is also a rational number. And let's take a look at how that would play out here. So here, again, we're going to be multiplying two binomial radical expressions. So we'll use our FOIL method. So we have our first terms, that gives us 25. We have our outside terms, 5 times the square root of 7. That gives us just 5 root 7. Now our two inside terms, we have negative square root of 7 times 5. So that's going to be minus 5 times the square root of 7. And now we have our two last terms. The negative square root of 7 times the positive square root of 7. Well, that will give us, if we take a look over on the side, negative square root of 7 times the square root of 7. That's going to equal to the negative square root of 49. And that's just equal to negative 7. So we'll add on here, minus 7. And now if we take a look, we have these two like terms, or like radicals in the middle, both a square root of 7. And notice that they're opposites. One is a positive 5 square root of 7, and the other is a negative 5 square root of 7. So those two are basically just going to cancel each other out right there. And now we're left with 25 minus 7, and that will give us 18.